Welcome to the Gouden Lijntjes Podcast. My name is Anne-Jorien de Kuiper, and usually I draw with my guests while talking about creative entrepreneurship. But this episode is going to be a little bit different because I have a feeling that my guest wouldn't even have said yes if I'd forced her to hold a pencil while talking. But I did really want to interview her because she's been the biggest inspiration for my creative entrepreneurship, my business journey and everything. So I'm really happy to have her. Her name is Celine Charlotte. She's a 35-year-old entrepreneur and she's an online educator. She's just pretty awesome at making money. She runs C.Academy, which she took from 0 to 7 figures in under 2 years. And with her online courses, she teaches over 18,000 entrepreneurs all about building an online business, creating online courses, productivity, money, and investing. And I personally absolutely eat up her daily vlogs and all her podcasts, in which she not only shares those helpful business tips, but she also just blatantly spills all the tea about topics like plant medicine, loneliness, business fails, and how to turn underwear into collars for her dog Bella. And the thing that inspires me the most about her is that she always reinvents herself and her business with a speed and confidence that blows my mind. Despite having a successful business in the Netherlands, she recently moved from the Netherlands to Sedona in Arizona in the US to start a new life and a whole new business. I have no doubt that she'll succeed over there, and I want to know about the ways in which she's planning out her American dream. So Celine, welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this lovely introduction. If I have a guest, I should introduce the guest like this, because this is really heartwarming.
I'm happy to hear that. You warm my heart with all your inspirational stories and everything, so I'm happy to return the favor.
Just to make it clear, I would have come, if I would be able, I'm now in America, of course, and you're in the Netherlands, I would have drawn. I think that's an amazing...
You would? You would?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. I'll take you up on that promise, because next time when you're ever back in Amsterdam, I'm ordering all the pencils that I can find, and I will put you behind a sheet of paper and make you draw. Oh, that would be so fun. I think you would draw your dog, I think.
No, that one thing I always doodle, and I love doodling. So I'm always, whenever I'm sitting in a meeting or whatever, I'm always drawing something. I always draw dresses. So princess dresses, basically. Yeah.
Well, that kind of makes sense because you love Disney, you love dresses, you even love LARPing. Mm-hmm. I think one of my first impressions of you is that you're a very creative person. Maybe not that much about drawing, but you are a very creative person in your business, in your ideas and everything. Like recently, how you came up with that crazy idea of hiring 20 people at once from all different time zones, I think within a day or something. How do you come up with all those creative ideas?
I think I got it from my mom, because one of the reasons why I really liked being in your podcast is that there is this weird thing sometimes that people feel like, oh, I'm creative, so I'm not good in making money. And I actually think that when you're creative, you're probably extremely good in making money. It's just the mindset. You have to think of creativity in business models. Most of my creativity is linked to business models or making money in a way. But my mom definitely is the creative one who taught me all of that. I grew up in a family where money wasn't... Well, we weren't poor, but we wouldn't go out for dinner, or the Efteling. That's one of the most famous family parks in the Netherlands. That would be a very special day if we would go to the Efteling. It would be once every 3 years, and it's like the big event in our lives. And my mom she did everything herself in the household. So painting the house, making the art for the house. She always come up with ways to do it very cheap. Somewhere from a thrift store, she would buy things and then make something herself. So I grew up with the mentality that you can do things yourself if you want to, and that everything is possible, and you don't have to buy the store-bought. You can create it for a couple of dollars yourself. And that really influenced me, I think, and I have that mentality in my business now too, that I always think of a creative solution. Is there a way to do this in a different way than maybe most people would do it?
Sounds like a very, very good way to look at life. I like how you said that sometimes being creative, as in making art, is associated with not making any money at all, the starving artist principle. And you say, from back home, I used to learn that we didn't have a lot of money. I had to do all these creative things to get by. But then for some reason, you do have an incredible money mindset, and you didn't get stuck in that creative or starving artist principle and not have any money. I hear you say all the time, I'm not afraid of raising my prices or my fees or anything because I don't need to be accessible to anyone, or I don't need to have those low prices to have all my products be accessible to everyone. So there is that duality. How did that come about?
So most money blockages, people who are unwilling or they can't make more money, it's one of those two reasons that you just called. Those are in the way of them making more money. And one is, I want to be accessible, I want to help the world, so I need to be accessible to all. It's a misconception because the people who help, actually the most people who have the most impact in the world, are probably rich. If I think of people who helped me in my journey of becoming who I am, I think of people like Tony Robbins or Oprah Winfrey, examples who are out there, who are visible. You can't make a one-on-one with Oprah Winfrey so she can give you some life advice, or Tony Robbins to give you some business advice. No, of course not. It's going to cost millions, or it's not even possible. But because they're so scarce in their time and so expensive, they actually have the time to broadcast to thousands and millions of people out there. So the more exclusive you make yourself, the more time you have to give free content out there for everyone to enjoy. While if you are booked day to day with appointments that will get you $60 an hour, you actually have to have your calendar full with meetings because otherwise you can't pay your rent. So the sooner you can get that idea out of your head, oh, I want to help so much people, so I need to be cheap, towards I want to help a lot of people, so I need to be extremely expensive, so I have a lot of time left to give all my free stuff out there for everyone to enjoy, the better it is. And the other mindset block, that is indeed like, I'm a starving artist, but I'm an artist and I do it for the art. I'm this enlightened, creative soul that the people don't understand.
And I can't sell my soul to the devil of commercialism. Yeah.
To overcome that, I was a little bit in the same environment because I used to be a journalist for over 7 years. And a journalist, it's a little bit the same as a creative. I feel that it's idea of you're doing this for the world and the world needs your writing and we don't get paid much, but at least we're delivering the truth to the world. And I niched down. I wrote a lot of articles about entrepreneurs and about money and about psychology of money. And I started realizing that the people you surround yourself with or you identify yourself with, you're going to look like those people. And I start thinking, do I really want to have the life of a struggling journalist for the rest of my life? Not really. So I start practicing different approaches towards money and towards time management to be able to make more money as a journalist. And while I was doing that, the other journalists looked down on me. I was making $8,000 or $9,000 a month as a journalist because I have all these techniques and all these ways of doing things. And I noticed it was just the other journalists, they felt like you're now out of the group. You're not a struggling journalist anymore. So you're not like part of us anymore. And that is such a strong realization. What group do you identify yourself with? And halfway of my journalism career, I started identifying myself more as an entrepreneur instead of as a journalist. And because I identify myself as an entrepreneur, I start surrounding myself with people who think the same way. And then it's actually easier to even make more money. So as long as you are as an artist, surround yourself with artists who also don't make money, I feel you're limiting yourself. But the good news is there are also artists who do make a lot of money. So there's always people, even though you feel like, oh man, everyone around me is struggling with money, find the examples in your surrounding online that actually are doing the same craft as you do and make a lot of money from it. And instead of looking down on that or feeling you're selling your soul to the devil, indeed, believe that, oh man, that's an example for me. I should start doing the same things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I thought this was one of the first parts where you really inspired me. I think we started out here in the Netherlands at around the same time, around 5 years ago. And I just started teaching some courses. And I think I was hosting something for 4 people in my kitchen for like 30 euros. And they didn't have to pay in advance. And then they didn't show up. And I made a whole thing about it and bought all the cookies and everything. And in the end, I just lost money to it. And then I think you came and said, wow, you can just double your prices. And maybe your ideal customer will come to you instead of you running after something that you don't really actually want. And the other thing that I think is really interesting, what you just said, is to kind of rewrite your own story. So your surroundings and your story. So the way that you get inspired by people that you follow online or see or read books from, but also what you call yourself. So you said, I'm going to call myself an entrepreneur rather than a journalist. And I think that also applies for being creative or being able to draw or being, able to do anything really. Do you think people can shape their ideas like that?
Oh, totally. I think it has all to do with realizing, is this really what I want in my life? And one of the exercises I do often is just look at all the different aspects of my life, like relationships or environment, where do I live, or career, or money-wise, or spirituality. And I give myself a number between 1 and 10 for it. And it could be that I feel like spirituality, that's right now at 3. And do I want that, or do I want it to make it an 8? And if I wanted to make an 8, what is needed for me to change in my daily habits and my mindset to become that it will be an 8? When you are stuck a little bit in your life and you start realizing that you actually have the power to change all these little parts of your life by just first admitting to yourself, like, okay, this is how it looks like right now. I'm actually not that happy with my money. And that you then can change them. And the change is often in the small things. It's a mindset, feeling like, okay, I'm going to embrace spirituality. I'm going to embrace making more money. I'm going to embrace the entrepreneur in myself. And I'm going to feel like an entrepreneur. And on the other hand, it's just discipline and daily actions. When I first started my money journey, and I was dabbling as a journalist entrepreneur for a long time then, and I realized I was more and more an entrepreneur, but I didn't own my own business. I was still writing for the newspaper. And then one morning I just said to myself, okay, it's done with writing for the newspaper. I'm really going to embrace the entrepreneur in me. What does an entrepreneur do? What would the version of me who's a very successful entrepreneur, what would she eat for breakfast? What would she say on a daily basis? What time would she get up? What books would she read? What friends would she have? So I wrote it all down for myself, exactly how I envisioned myself as a successful entrepreneur. And I started doing all the things that I could already do. I started implementing them in my life. And there's so much. And that is also, I think, one of the misconceptions about changing your life. There is so much you can do without having the money, but yet already living that rich life. The rich life for me, for instance, was, and it's a little bit of a weird example, but I love raspberries. And
yes, me too. My favorite.
Right. I always thought they were very expensive. I'm not sure. I live now in America and everything is here even more expensive. I think I pay $6 now for a box of raspberries, but I think in the Netherlands it was like $4 or something like that. And I always felt like, well, it's a very special occasion. I would eat raspberries because it's $4 and you can't eat like a whole box in one time because, it's an expensive treat. And in my rich life, I always envisioned myself eating raspberries every day, not caring about the money. One of the habits I embraced when I started envisioning myself as a more rich person is literally buying those raspberries every day. And it's only a $4 investment, but it did so much to my mindset to give myself that rich life experience of eating raspberries every day and not caring that it was $4. And those are actually one of like the 1,000 steps I could already do to feel myself as a rich person.
It translates really well, I think, to creativity. And maybe it's not, the expense of a box of raspberries, but maybe it's how luxurious it feels to make time to draw every day. And people are like, right. Oh, if only I were an artist and I had like whole afternoons to draw, that would be fabulous. But I could never in my life imagine that to be impossible. And then you just start with like 15 minutes, or maybe you buy your first beautiful pencil or something. Like when you start doing something really small of that list of envisioning what you really want to be, then you're already one step ahead of the rest who doesn't do it.
Really? Yeah, I kind of imagine that, like, for instance, that there are more fancy pencils than other, right? There must be different brands. And, yeah.
Don't get me started on this because we will fill 3 days with talking about this. Yes.
Okay, well, just a short example, like how I would do it then. If I wouldn't have the money to buy all the pencils in every color, I would just start with one fancy pencil in a color, just to give myself the idea like, oh, this is how it is when you can draw with a better brand of pencil.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't necessarily have to be about those fancy pencils, but it can be like, oh, I'll just get the pencils from my son or daughter and I'll just spend 5 minutes drawing every day. It doesn't have to be about money, but about that mindset. So I really like that. And I think that mindset also comes across in the way you just rebooted your whole journey, your whole business journey, and, started over in the States with your business in English and everything and your whole new target group. It's amazing how you do that. And I was wondering, when you're back at square one like that, and I think you shared on your Instagram stories somewhere that you said, I'm the only one who can now envision this image in my head of what it's supposed to look like already in my business. And I have this vision, this idea, this great way it's going to look like. But I can imagine that a lot of people don't see it and that you get a lot of, I don't know, maybe... let's call them haters. Let's say haters. People are like, oh, how are you going to do this? Oh, you're wasting all that potential that you have with your Dutch business. How do you stay loyal to that idea, that envisioning?
Well, this is the step to go to English and to do everything over in English. I thought it would be easier for me. It's actually one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I know, looking back at my life, I can take pretty brisk decisions because my intuition says, stop with my first company. I had a company in renting out meeting venues, and I can stop things, while for other people it's like, no, don't stop it. You're making so much money, or so go great. And I always feel like, no, I'm doing that other thing. With stopping my Dutch business, or at least starting to translate everything in English, it's the hardest thing because it's bumping into one of my biggest insecurities, and that is my English. And my business is built on how I speak and how I teach, and the quickness of my storytelling and the quickness of being able to transform the ideas in my head into really fun and storytelling way of teaching them in Dutch. And I struggle right now, and even during this podcast, I struggle with saying exactly what I want to say in English, because I know how I would do it in Dutch, but it's not as fluent in English yet. And for me, this transformation for my brand from Dutch to English is, because of that, one of the hardest things, because I feel like I'm a toddler again. I feel like I'm not bringing out whatever I want to bring out, and it's coming out in a very, very different way than I actually want to. And it's just basically every time, and I scheduled a couple of podcasts now in English, and you're my second podcast, I kind of have to jump in with knowing this is not as good as it would be in Dutch, but my intuition says that English is the way to go, and let's just do it. And I try to embrace the learning process of it. So right now, there's so much for me to learn in English. What I had in the Netherlands with my Dutch courses, I was getting a little bit too accustomed to, indeed, the fame or the easiness of making money. And right now I have to prove myself all over again. Usually I find it really exciting, and now it's the extra level of difficulty because of the different language. What was your question exactly? I'm just started babbling, and I'm like, what was your question?
It was, how do you stay loyal to your idea? How do you? Yeah.
What I always think of is, in 5 years, if I look back at this period, would I regret not doing it? And if I envision myself 5 years from now doing the Dutch courses and being successful with that, I can see that I would hit an upper limit for me. Like, I would probably be really bored. And if I think of myself 5 years from now doing everything in English and being able to have a way bigger impact, and also just, for me, it's not, of course, the money is interesting. It's way more interesting for me to sell a course in English because there's just a way bigger market. But apart from that, it's so much more interesting for me to do everything in English because the playing field as an entrepreneur is bigger. I can literally now have team members all over the world who all speak English, and I can use software that is only now available to English-speaking podcasters or English-speaking video makers because the software, the artificial intelligence, only recognize English. So all of a sudden, my tools as an entrepreneur are 10 times as big as when I was in Dutch. So when I close my eyes and I think of that prospect or that future in English, that is so exciting to me that I know that nobody else around me can really feel that future. So then I feel like, well, I feel that future and I'm excited about that. So that has to like pull me forward through all the blockages that I feel by going that path. And the second thing, I do get criticized a lot. And also indeed now when I do everything in English, please don't do it in English. And well, your English is so bad and blah, 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 blah. And I just always think, thank you. I just feel like, okay, do I want to have your life? That is one of my main questions whenever I get criticized or whenever people come with advice. I always pause, think of their life and feel like, do I want to switch life with you? And for most people, that is a no for me. And if I think of my heroes in business, I cannot imagine one of them saying, oh yeah, Celine, just keep doing what you were doing in the Netherlands and don't grow. Like everyone would say, no, please do it in English, grow, get out of your comfort zone. So I always envision whenever I get criticism or advice that might not really work for me, I envision what my heroes would advise me and if I would want to switch life with them. And then basically it's always pretty clear that I just have to follow my own path.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And I see a lot of resemblance in the way that people embark on their creative journey while drawing. Basically, you just don't mind being bad at something. You said it's annoying that my English isn't as good as I would want to, but I think that's a big part of your secret. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that you love learning. You love trying out new things and you love, I don't know, sucking at something, and just because there's so much room for growth. And I feel like a lot of people maybe tie their worth and their identity to the results of something instead of the journey. Right. And I find that a very, very inspiring lesson that you teach through sharing your business journey. So thank you for that.
Well, I really try to have a lot of before and afters in my life because I love progress. And you can even see it on social media. Everyone loves a good before and after. And, you know, those movies that you see somebody hula hoop. Is that a word in English? Like the hula hoop thing?
I think so. Yeah,
I think so too. And then they say like, okay, this was 6 months ago and you see them struggling. And then after 6 months, all of a sudden they're really good in it. And our brain is also wired to love progress, to see progress. And for me in my life, just looking back at my first vlogs on Instagram when I was vlogging for the first time and being so shy and being so uncomfortable in front of a camera and comparing that with how I do it now, that brings me a lot of joy, just knowing that I gave myself that opportunity to grow. So indeed, that is also what pulls me now towards my bigger goal of becoming more fluent in English and starting all over. I can't wait till in 4 years I'm going to look back at this interview between us and I hear myself struggling a little bit sometimes, or I see that I'm searching for words or that I'm a little bit afraid. And just knowing that already right now in this moment gives me joy because there will be an after. And I always have that rule in mind that if you do something for 100 hours, that you're an expert or something. Like most people don't put in those 100 hours and I actually can do that. It's literally giving the hours to something that you feel like I want to be better in it. And then after 100 hours, you will be better.
Yeah. And you give yourself some really nice measuring points by just sticking out your neck and doing this in public, because recording a podcast while at that point where you're not entirely secure yet, instead of waiting until you're super secure about everything and then, you know, I'll show the world and just release my perfect podcast, then you don't have those measuring points to see your growth. So yeah.
So that took me a while, to be honest. I was like totally thinking, okay, the first podcast, it has to be way better than now. And I just stopped and started and stopped and started. And that is maybe one of the things that I try to embrace is what is the easiest way now for me to do this anyway? Because I apparently cannot do it by myself. Like whenever I sit behind my mic by myself, it's not coming out. I don't find it good enough. And then I thought, well, if I just arrange a couple of interviews, I have to show up. Like this morning, it's for me 8 a.m. I knew I had this interview and I knew I had to be ready and you were waiting for me. So it wasn't possible for me to back out. So whenever I find something really hard, I try to find a way that I just have to go through it.
You know that this was one of the most valuable tips that you gave me. Do you remember when we met 5 years ago?
Totally,
like
yeah.
One-on-one. You do? Yeah, that's very nice. And one of the best tips that you gave me that I still use today is finding out my tendencies. The four tendencies by Gretchen Rubin, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So the thing that you said right now about giving yourself deadlines and just meeting outer expectations to basically make sure that you're accountable to someone else, that really helped me in doing all these things and maybe overcoming my fears. it seems contradictory, but maybe it actually helped to do it out in the open and then just having to do it. You've said A, so now you have to do B. It helped.
Well, and there's also something really liberating in just opening up your learning process to people, because everyone is learning something, and we're
all human.
Yeah, and it's really
we make mistakes, we learn.
Yeah. It's so freeing to just be able to talk about your fears or to address them and say, hey, I'm trembling from fear, but here is what I just made, or this is what I'm going to put out there. And I know I still have things to learn, but I'm actually really glad with this and this. And that is maybe one of the things I also need to learn about this whole English thing, that I am not every time telling, oh, it's so fearful for me, but I'm also just celebrating. It actually went really well. Like this time, the interview went really well, and I could find a couple of words that I wasn't able to do 2 months back. So celebrating what went well, and that is a thing that I think that creatives have a lot, that they are always focusing on things that were not perfect enough. You made something, and then there's this small thing, that detail that you wanted different, and then your emphasis lies on that part for you, but the other people just see something beautiful and they don't even notice it. So it's really good to be aware of whenever you're sharing your progress, that you're also just sharing the things that went well and you celebrate that.
Yeah, and I think this ties in perfectly into two things that I wanted to ask you about, because I think it ties into comparing yourself to others instead of a past version of yourself. And also maybe about your eagerness to learn. When learning is your hobby, when you really enjoy it and you apply that to every aspect in your life, because for some reason you seem to find, I don't know, whether it's Bella, whether your dog, whether it's making friends in a new location, you find a way to make it business related. You find good advice and everything. I have this too with my hobby is drawing, or it didn't always used to be, but now it is. And I make content online too on Instagram. So now everything I see around me is content and work. It's no longer my hobby. It's no longer my life. I'm not exactly sure where business Anna ends and private Anna starts. And this is something that I see you too, and especially comparing to everybody else sharing their stuff and their progress online, it might feel overwhelming. So something I struggle with a lot is, when have you done enough? Like, when do you not feel guilty about not being productive, for example, or not turning something into content, or not growing, stopping, just accepting the place that you are in life?
Right. Good question, because it's actually one that I contemplate pretty often. Like, what is the goal? Like, what am I striving for? Is this always coming from maybe insecure or unhappiness inside me, that I always need to have something better or a better scenario? I have a lot of pauses actually in my sharing. So there are weeks, I think last week I wasn't online at all. There's also a lot of breaks that I take from my business. So I can go 3 weeks without really teaching a lot or sharing or doing something on my business. Being efficient with my time, learning new things, seeing projects in almost everything around me. Like, I get a dog. It's not just, oh, yay, I have a dog. I'm now focused on getting like the best connection with her and training her in the way that she and I have a great relationship, and knowing everything there is from dogs. And I see life almost always like that. And you would think like, okay, then a break is really nice. But actually, when I'm on a break, I just get bored again. And I start making projects of other things in my life. Because in the end, I really get so happy of progress and organizing my life in the way that I like things. And I get so happy of learning that for me, there's not really a break needed so much from it. And I think designing your life for me means that whatever you're interested in, you can turn into a project of becoming better at it. And there's so much in life that I don't really invest in. I'm looking at a plant right now. I don't know anything about plants. I literally bought these plants and I have no idea how much water they need. And there's so much still that I don't touch. But the things that I do touch, I just get so happy from them. And it benefits me so well that I don't really need a break, or I don't really feel like, oh, I need to learn from it. I just want to learn more about it. I definitely struggle sometimes with feeling that I'm not productive enough. And it's not that I feel like, oh, I need to be better in my work, or I need to make more money, but it's mostly because I know that when I get up in the morning at 5 and I eat a healthy breakfast and I do my gym exercises, I do breathing exercises, I write in my journal, I have this whole productive day laid out. those are my most fun days. And for some people, it might sound like horror. For me, that is how I feel that I lived, like I got the most out of the day. I enjoy those days so much. So after 2 or 3 days just watching Netflix, sleazing around, I'm usually done with it again. And I'm like, okay, let's go back to schedules now. Because, yeah, I do love scheduling.
Oh, but you do have days where there's 2 or 3 days of watching Netflix.
Oh, totally. Like all the time. Like
you do?
Oh, yeah. I show that on Instagram.
This is amazing to hear. I'm so happy about this. Okay, let me confess this. You know that there was one point where I almost unfollowed you? You want to hear what that was?
Yes.
This is a personal issue that I have about comparing yourself to other people. I think there was a moment when you still lived in Amsterdam, and I think you shared some very, very open and honest stories about being alone, being there and not having someone to come home to. And it felt super heartfelt. And I think you even shared yourself crying. I was like, I'm feeling for you so much. And you somehow also managed to turn it around to saying, oh yeah, and then I just reflect and I write everything down. And you had a whole system of how to cool yourself down, and you said, yeah, it takes a while. I was like, yeah, girl, I have those weeks too. And then next story was that you said, this takes me about 15 minutes. I was like, I'm just gonna lock myself in a room right now somewhere. It just feels like you're so productive. So to actually hear that you have days on which you Netflix too, that actually feels like a relief. And
oh yeah, in December I binge watched whole Grey's Anatomy, I think 6 seasons in 3 weeks or something.
Good to hear.
I don't go to bed every day at 7:30. I sometimes, like, I think 2 days ago, I watched a show, and then around 11 p.m. I decided to bake a cake in the middle of the night because I was feeling like it.
As one does.
Indeed. I always try to show that, though, on Instagram. Like, I just, all of a sudden I feel more productive. So now I'm working. But yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I should even show that even more, because it is annoying and obnoxious if you feel that somebody is just always productive. And it's definitely not how life is at all.
I did not mean to call you annoying and obnoxious. And no, I was going. I also try to show the dark side, the not productive side behind the entrepreneurship. But I feel like whenever you're online, just being present already gives people a feeling of, wow, she's got her life together, and wow, she's doing so well. Yeah. So whether I'm showing something about, hey, I'm watching Netflix and I don't know, maybe I made one drawing in 5 days, then people are like, oh, you're doing really well, right? And yeah, it just feels like, I think things get twisted a little bit when they're shared online. So it's easy to compare yourself.
Yeah, you get small snippets of somebody's life, so it's very easy to think this is her whole day. She's been drawing now whole day because she shows a drawing, but it might have been for you just only 15 minutes. And that is also the beauty, though. It's actually, you can change your own story about yourself. And this is maybe a little bit meta, but you can change your own story about yourself by starting an online presence that really highlights certain parts of your life, right? And I'm known as somebody who's really efficient and productive and a really businesswoman. And I enhance that own story about myself by posting a lot about those subjects. So you start also seeing yourself as somebody who is an entrepreneur and really effective and productive. I think especially as a creative, or if you want to be an artist, if you just start sharing about your art online, it becomes pretty quickly that you are actually identifying yourself more as an artist, I would imagine.
Yeah, I really like that idea because it gives you an actual concrete way to rewrite your story, the thing that we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, to rephrase the idea about yourself. So I really like that.
Yeah.
I think that's a really nice way to end things, except that I want to ask you one more question.
Yes.
And that is, if you were an artist, you are an artist, you're a business artist, but if you were an artist, what kind of art would you make? What kind of discipline would you choose?
It was a week ago. I want to have really big paintings in my house, and then from ceiling to the floor. And they're pretty hard to get online, so I couldn't really find somebody. So I thought, well, I'm just going to make them myself. So I bought everything to make huge modern art paintings. I bought how do you call that? The thing you paint on?
Yes,
I bought a canvas roll. I bought all these woodworking materials so I can make my own frames. And I bought paint. I've got everything to start painting. So that would definitely be one of my first creative projects that I want to do now. And I think as an artist, designing dresses, that would be one
definitely
of
an art.
Okay.
Definitely an art.
Like that, yeah, that would really speak to my heart.
What does a dress look like that's in your head right now? Because I can see that you're thinking of a dress.
It's poofy. It is pink and pastel with a lot of bows and a lot of roses. It's definitely over the top.
I can't wait to ever see your dresses. Are they in your future plans for your future business plans for next year? Or is it
Not really. And that's also one of the things, like not everything has to be a business. And that is something I have to tell myself all the time, because whenever I start something, even when I bought all that paint and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to make this huge paintings for my house. I'm like, oh, and I can sell them because apparently it's pretty hard to get around. And I'm like, no, Celine, it doesn't have to be about a business. It's just now for fun. No, but I can see myself maybe taking some classes of designing dresses later on in life. Yeah.
I look forward to seeing them someday. Thank you so much. It was so much fun to have you in the podcast. And I'm looking forward to seeing all your new creative adventures, whether it's business-wise or dresses or collars for Bella. We'll see everything just hopping by on your stories. If you want to follow Celine, you can. You can see everything on Instagram at Celine Charlotte. I would highly recommend watching it. You can also follow me at Gouden Lijntjes if you want to. And if you're looking to explore your inner artist, I, of course, have a bunch of courses on learning how to draw, even if you think you can't, because I think everybody can. But of course, Celine also has her own business courses, which I can also highly recommend. Both are courses you can find in the show notes of this podcast. And make sure to also check out my previous episodes, which are in Dutch, where I talk and draw with several creative entrepreneurs. I'll see you.
That is such an wait, Anna. So much, that is Celine. Such a great way of ending this podcast. I'm listening with a lot of admiration, because I was about to ask you, like, okay, where can we follow you, or what do you do? Tell me really quick, because I was like, oh, of course, people want to find you now, and you do it so good. So that is one thing that I really admire, and that is something that so many people can learn from you. You had an amazing intro. You have a very smart and amazing outro. That is just, yeah, that is great. What is your most popular course?
Thank you so much. They're all fairly popular because I have courses on very different subjects. So I have drawing with pencils, drawing with paint. I also have digital drawing. I find it very interesting that the digital drawing on your iPad in Procreate, that's followed by a lot of business people as well. You know, sometimes they're like, oh, my boss will pay for this. I'm like, good for you. That's very smart. And the other ones are more just hobbies that people pick up on more easily. So it depends. And all of them are actually very well followed, so I'm happy about that.
That is awesome. What is your cheapest course you can buy from you?
So the cheapest courses are actually a couple. They're 75 euros right now. I don't know when people are listening to this, because someone taught me that I should always raise my prices at some point.
Yes, someone did.
I don't know how much they're going to be. Someone did. But for example, drawing birds with alcohol markers, or you can draw like these cute little cartoon animals with colored pencils. Or I personally like maybe one of my favorites, because I recently released it. It's drawing pets with gouache, which is like a paint type of thing. And it's, people always think that it's so hard, but I like to make it super easy, and I'm so proud. And when people are really skeptic about how they're thinking, oh, I could never do that and I can never draw. And then, because I think there's like 500 people in each course, and then you just see that whole board filling up with all the beautiful results, and people are like, oh, did this just come out of my fingers? I didn't know. So that makes me super proud.
And I asked about the cheapest one, because sometimes even if you're listening to this and you don't really have a desire to draw, there might be somebody in your environment that you feel like, oh, he or she likes drawing, and it's such a fun gift to give a course like that for somebody. So that was why I was mentioning that. Well, thank you so much, Anna. And in the show notes, you can find the Instagram of Anna, so you can look her up. I think most of your courses are all in Dutch though, right?
Most of my, yes, because someone also advised me to just switch to Dutch if most of your target group is Dutch anyway. So I used to have some in English, but I don't anymore.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. And I'm thinking of my advice of doing it in Dutch. But if you want to go global, you should start doing it in English again. You can always
I do, yeah. And maybe I should also have a company name that's actually pronounceable in English. But no, yeah, I'm actually really happy with that decision because I'm also like on Dutch TV and it made me practice more about speaking Dutch on camera. And for now, it feels like a really good decision. So who knows where I'll be in 2 years. Maybe I'll come find you somewhere in Sedona.
Switch. Yeah,
exactly.
That would be good. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.